Good morning. This is section 4 of the Phylum Chordata, and this will be a shorter section because I just started running out of time for the reptiles. But if you want to, you should really compare the reptiles and birds. They have a lot of characteristics, except one flies and has feathers, and the other one does not. They have a lot of internal characteristics that are similar, especially with the cloaca and with their excretion system. Birds have a much more um, eff- efficient lung as well, and their blood system is a little bit different, having four chambers. But the main characteristic of the birds is that they have feathers. Class Aves, there are some very characteristic early, what is believed to be early ancestors in the evolutionary chain of things, a reptile or a small dinosaur, uh, Archaeopteryx, sorry, I stuttered there. Archaeopteryx with a feathered outside. Now, there's been a number of fakes of this, but there are a number of very uh, uh, realistic and true fossils of this. But this is considered to be a quintessential example of evolutionary theory, a missing link, if you will, not so missing anymore, where we have a mix of bird characteristics and reptile characteristics. Basically, the argument of, well, why would you worry about feathers? Well, it gives you a flight advantage, so you can either use that for hunting or getting away from predators, and it also helps protect your body against the environment, especially with insulation. Now, flight does not come without a price. You have to have a very reduced skeleton and hollow bones in order to get any kind of lift out of this. And you have to have a pretty large wingspan and surface area to uh, actually have flight. So when we're looking at the bones of a human, it's very tightly packed here. And with the bird bones, they're very easily broken, actually. They're not made for heavy impact and gravity. But this increased or decreased, I should say, decreased bone density lends to a very, very light bone structure. Now, they have a full, very effective lung, and it's slightly different than ours. It has a um, uh, posterior and anterior air sacs where it fills um, these sacs up with oxygen and then pushes it over the exchange area, and it's called a side current or right current exchange in these lungs. Um, Sorry, I yawned. Um, these lungs are very efficient, and actually, this is why the idea or phrase "canary in the mine shaft" is so important. Canaries were cheap. They sung very loudly all the time, so you always knew when they were alive. And their lungs are, like most birds, are exquisitely sensitive to gases that are not oxygen. People who raise birds know that you can't even cook very easily with Teflon because it lets out aerosolized particles that can kill a bird very quickly within 10 minutes. Now, the canaries in the mine shaft, they would bring these canaries down before they could sense poisonous gases that they might have cut into or released into their environment. And when the canaries stopped singing and were dead, they knew they had to get out. So, canary in the mine shaft, if somebody is using this as um, um, a phrase involving you, you should probably get different friends or change your job. So, with these, they have a very developed lung and air sacs, much different than ours. They have these hard-shelled eggs to protect against damage in the environment. They are the first one with a fully chambered, four-chambered heart. And we have a huge change in control of their metabolism. They are putting off enough heat to keep their internal organs at a comfortable temperature instead of having to use the environment as their heating source. So there are, while looking the same or similar to the Archaeopteryx, this is a huge change metabolically, uh, genetically, talking with tissues, so developing new tissues for the lung and these air sacs, and development metabolically of a whole new set of signaling pathways to make sure the tissues work together and produce a, uh, a higher amount of heat, if anything like that. So uh, there are a lot of smaller scale, well, macro and micro set questions that are big questions that people have to answer. And to be fair, it is not really going to be shown in fossil records, but you can't hand wave your stuff, your arguments over this and say, well, it's evolution, when in fact we don't really have an answer for how evolutionary theory we can have this massive shift in these animals between the last class and this class. Of course, there's a wide variety of these. The flamingo, it filter feeds. Its pink color is from the krill it actually and macroorganisms it eats. The bald eagle is basically kind of a predator, but really something that feeds on dead things as well. It's not as noble as we would want. I'm really on the side of the turkey as our symbol, but that has been a dead subject for a while. And then the cardinal, which is considered like the punk rock bird of the North Americas. Also, if you catch them in a completely legal bird tagging way, watch out for your fingers, because those that beak that's used to crack open seeds, really hurts on your finger. Okay, here's the interior characteristics of that bird. We have the lung here, but we have sacs that will actually fit over here, and we had to take out some of them just to let you see everything else. And they bring in air, then they push it over the lung and hold it in the front air sacs and then out. So it has something called circular breathing. Ours is just a tidal breathing where we bring it in, gas exchange happens, and breathe it out. But they have that circular breathing that I've talked about before. They also have some little extras onto their digestive tract called the crop. Basically, they have small pebbles and such that will help grind up their food against this muscular sac. And then it gets passed into the stomach and the intestine to be broken down. Uh, they also have a liver and pancreas, very much like ours. Now, this cloaca is a shared sewer. They have their kidney as well as their reproductive organs all feeding into it before it is pooped out. And that means that we have that uric acid again being pooped out, and that's that white substance in bird feces. But also that when we are eating eggs, we have to think about it. A lot of birds have salmonella, and salmonella can swim up this cloaca where it was in the intestinal tract to the place in the reproductive organs where the eggshell hasn't been put on yet. And so it can colonize the egg cell itself and then get shelled in later on before it is laid. So that is why you're not encouraged to and actively discouraged from eating raw eggs. But fear not, oh, those who are sitting at home wanting to have a consoling stick of cookie dough. You can order on Amazon Prime an entire gallon of eggless cookie dough that tastes exactly the same. So you can get your 20 pounds on for COVID um, isolation, all from cookie dough if you want. There, I have helped make America fatter. Now, the one other really interesting characteristic in birds is their feathers. And if you've ever played with a feather when you're a kid, you can kind of tease apart these little um, smaller parts of the feather and then stroke it enough along its kind of grain, if you will, and they'll start rehealing. Maybe not all of them, but most of them. And that's because each one of these barbs, these kind of lines of it, have these little hooks that are in keratin-like hooks that hook all these little barbs together, kind of like Velcro. And this is important because if they're all hooked together, we have this seamless, almost air directionality. And when we have many of these feathers together, it helps with flight. And if you have them all as a seamless directionality for air, you can have a lift system, like a airplane wing, where it will direct air over the surface or under the surface and create a vacuum for lift because it's slowing down the air on the top. Basic physics that we use for flight. So uh, just having these feathers are really fascinating, and birds have a number of different types of feathers, some for insulation underneath, some for that are very strong for control of fine hovering and movement and gliding, and then there's some for short bursts of flight and fast movement side to side to evade predators. So these feathers are really important in all their different types for survival of the bird. And I think they're awesome and fascinating. I think we're going to stop there because the next group is rather large, so we'll have a longer set talking about class Mammalia.